Okay, so this video is all about setting things up to get code coverage analysis on your machine, on your local machine, when you're working with a .NET project. Now, if you go on the Visual Studio website, probably most of you out there are using Visual Studio for your .NET development, you'll see that there is code coverage analysis built into Visual Studio. So that's awesome. So maybe you click on Learn More, takes you to a nice little article on how to use it. But one of the first things you'll notice is that the code coverage feature is available only in Visual Studio Enterprise Edition. And maybe you don't have Visual Studio Enterprise. Does that mean that that's it, you can't get code coverage analysis? No, and that's what this video is all about, how to set things up to get that kind of information, data analysis, even if you're not on Visual Studio Enterprise Edition, using open source packages and extensions. And I'm going to show you how to set things up to get some code coverage information from the command line from Visual Studio Code using packages and extensions, and also from Visual Studio, like working in Visual Studio, how to get that code coverage information. All right, let's begin. So let's just go to the terminal here. I'm in the root project, the root folder, sorry, of an internal project here. We've got at Nimble Pros. It's a kind of a proof of concept we're doing for getting metrics, code complexity metrics for some of the projects we're working on. And okay, let's just take a look at the structure here. We've got our source folder and our tests folder. The tests folder contains one test project. It has, I think, just a handful of tests at the moment. And so let's just do .NET. Just confirm that our tests are passing. We've got a few projects in the source folder that are being exercised by those tests. It's building and running, eventually running our tests. Okay, there we go. All right, everything passes. Yeah, so we've got 4 tests at the moment. So what if I want to get code coverage information about those tests, right? And I don't have Visual Studio Enterprise. There is a nice little package that we can use, and that's what I'm going to show you right now. Let's see. That package is called Coverlet. Coverlet. And if you look at, let's go back to our command line here. Okay, let's go into our tests folder and our test project, right? And let's open our, let's open our CSproj, or at least just print its content. You'll see we're using XUnit as our test framework, and XUnit out of the box comes with Coverlet.collector as a dependency, I guess you could say. It installs Coverlet collector anyways. But what we're going to do, is install an additional Coverlet package, Coverlet.MSbuild, which will allow us to use it in the way we want from the command line. So let's do that. I'm already in the functional tests project folder, so I can just do .NET add package, there we go, Coverlet.MSbuild. It'll reach out to NuGet for me and it'll install it. Did that work? It seems like it did. Let's just run our cat again. Yep, okay, right, Coverlet.MSbuild. Great, so we're in business now. From there, it's as simple as running .NET test, but this time adding a flag p collect coverage equals true. Now, if we run that, it'll collect coverage information for us, all that sweet data that we need to get useful information about which lines of code, which if statements are covered by tests or not. And as you can see now, we're getting this nice little kind of summary after our test results. And it's pretty high level, right? It'll give it to us for the whole basically for all of the source code that's being touched by the tests, but also broken down by module. And you get the coverage for lines, branch, and method. And this is already pretty interesting stuff, right? It's better than what we had, which was nothing. Now we get a sense of how much coverage we have for our total project and for for per module, which is nice, but in and of itself is not super useful in terms of knowing where we should focus our efforts to add more test coverage, right? So ideally what we'd want is something that tells us, is this line of code covered? What's the percentage of line or branch or method coverage in this particular module, or in not this module because we already have that, but more like in this class or file, right? And we already, like the running Coverlet with .NET Test like we did, already generates the data that we need to get that information. Notice here that it generated a report inside the folder of our test project, and it called that file coverage.json. And if we look at that, we'll see, actually, let's do that. Let's just go inside of, or I'll CD back into the root of our project, and I'll just open VS Code in here. It'll be easier anyways. For the next steps, we're going to be installing some extensions in here, so we might as well. Okay, so if we look at coverage.json, it's a huge file that has a bunch of information about basically every single method and the lines and the coverage and all that stuff, right? The thing is, that's not human readable. So how do we get that data and basically find a way to visualize it so that we can use it? And that's where, extensions and other packages can come into play. What we're going to do next is install an extension called coverage gutters, I think it's called coverage. Yeah. Okay, so I already have it installed. I just need to enable it in this workspace. So we'll do that. Good. Now, you'll see that we now have this little button here, indicator, that says watch. So if I click on watch for the coverage gutters, it spins a little bit, and then we'll get this error message here that says could not find a coverage file. Search for lcov.info, cov.xml, coverage.xml, jacoco.x. Basically, there's a bunch of different kind of standardized formats for code coverage information, and it's saying, well, I can't find any of those in your project. And that makes sense, right? All we have is a coverage.json. And on top of that, it's located inside of our test project folder, whereas the tool is looking for those files at the root of our project. Now you could configure that so that it looks somewhere else, but we're just going to leave it like that for now, just so that I can, just for this demo. So we're not going to use this coverage.json file. I'm just going to go ahead and delete it for now. And what we're going to do, we're going to run our .NET test again with the p flag collector. Was it collect coverage equals true? And I'm trying to remember what the other one was. Oh, thank you. So, okay, we want to add now coverlet output format lcov, because that's one of the supported formats by coverage gutters, the extension we just installed. And we want to basically also add coverlet output and tell it that we want the file to be named lcov.info, because that's what why do I have an 8 here? That's interesting. Anyways, so let's run that. It should generate the file that we need. It will generate it. That's how Coverlet is set up. It will generate it in the folder of our test project. So if we leave it there, our tool, I don't think, will be able to find it, the coverage gutters extension although we can try and see if it picks it up. So there's our file, right? Basically the same information as the JSON file we had, but in a different format. Let's see if it picks it up. So we could go to let's see, our source, and let's just go to the web project, which is the main project with the entry program. Oh, it picks it up. There we go. So I was under the impression that it looked only for it at the root, but it doesn't. It found it in our project. So I guess it recursively looks from the root inside other folders for that particular file. And here's what I wanted to show you. Now we have coverage gutters. So basically right next to our source code, we see is this line of code covered? Green, yes. Red, no. Yellow is for branches when there's only one of the cases that's being covered by the tests. So maybe the true or the false, one of the two. So that's already a lot more useful than just that summary table that Coverlet prints out in the terminal. But in terms of discovery, this still doesn't really help me in knowing where I should look. Where do I need to focus my efforts? Well, I mean, it could, but I would have to basically open every file and look at, is there a lot of red here? Is there a lot of red here? Is there a lot of red here? Which is not very user-friendly, I guess you could say. So for that, there is another package that we're going to use, an open source package called report generator, which will output a nice HTML report that gives us, an easier way to digest, I guess, all the coverage information. And okay, let's go ahead, and there's different ways to install this depending on your setup. We're going to do this here. We're going to install it as a .NET tool so that we can use it from the command line. And let's just, okay, it gets us to do manifest first. Stick to VS Code, I guess. Integrated terminal, that worked fine for us. So .NET new tool manifest. Okay, great, that's done. Now we can copy the rest of it, the actual tool, install it, and I believe that worked. Let's give that a try. We can use it by saying .NET report generator. Okay, I already have it here, good. And as you can see, you need to pass in at least two properties, right? The reports flag and target dir flag. The tool won't work without those, but there is a lot more configuration that you can pass to this tool. Look at the docs for more on that. For this demo, we're only going to use those two, and we're basically saying this is the coverage data, that your input basically, and I want you to produce your output in this directory. We're actually going to use .coverage, I think is pretty common in VS Code. And in terms of this, I guess we need, since this isn't at the root, you know what, let's make our life easier. Won't have to type the path. I'm just going to move it to our root. There we go. And okay, so let's run this, and this should work. All right, take it there. It created. Yep. Okay, it worked. So now, if we look in our config .config folder, and yeah, see git. It's in my git ignore, I guess. Yeah, there we go. So that's one thing you gotta remember to do if you're gonna generate this kind of report, depending on the name of your directory. Make sure you put that in your git ignore. Don't want to end up with a whole basically website. It's not config, it's coverage. There we go. There it is. Okay. So yeah, it's basically a whole website. Now, how do you visualize that? You would normally need a server, but thankfully the extension we installed, the coverage gutters extension, also installs, if you don't already have it on your system, the live preview, I think. Yeah, Live Preview extension, which is an official Microsoft extension. Basically, as you see in the description, it hosts a local server in your workspace for you to preview your web pages on. And that's great because that's what we want to do. We want to preview a web page. Uh, so we've got our index.html. We right click on it and we can go to show preview. It'll start its server on port 3000 and open up basically a web page inside of VS Code. But what you can do is run it straight in the browser, open in browser, which is better, I think. And there you have it. Now you've got all the interesting information you could want. You can say, for instance, I only want the branch coverage. Great. And I want to sort this by percentage, right? So these are blank because there's no branches. And then you get to the ones that actually have branches but aren't covered. So that can be very useful. You could say, oh, what's this? 122 branches, none of them covered. So that's possibly somewhere I should think, about adding tests to cover this. Click on it. It shows you the source code with line by line detail of, if it's covered or not, how many visits in your tests. It's not covered, so obviously this would be 0. You can jump to different methods with this menu here. So all in all, a nice little reporting tool, open source and easy to set up, as you can see. All right, so that pretty much covers the use case of getting coverage. That pretty much covers, no pun intended, but the use case of using the command line and Visual Studio Code to get meaningful coverage information as you're working locally and developing your software. Now, what if you use Visual Studio but don't have the enterprise version? So let's see how we can get that kind of information in Visual Studio. Let's open up our project. I'll open up the same project in Visual Studio. That is part of the reason why I like VS Code. Okay. All right. So we've got our Nimble Metrics project. How do we get that kind of coverage information if we don't have an enterprise version of Visual Studio? Let's go to Extensions, Manage Extensions, and we're going to look for an extension called, I think it's Fine. I'm just going to type in coverage. It should be the first one that comes up. I think it's one of the most popular ones, Fine Code Coverage. I already installed it. You'll want to install it. And this is how to use it. Super easy. All you need to do is run your tests. It's a bit sluggish. There we go. Let's just run all tests in view. Waiting for build to complete. Build succeeded. Discovering tests. Yeah, it's a bit slower than usual. Got too much running on my machine, plus the video software, I guess, or I don't know. But it'll run them. We just have to be patient. There we go. Okay. Okay, so our tests are done running. Everything passes. Now you can see that we have a tab, Fine Code Coverage. So we can go to that tab. There was nothing showing up here because it's still parsing the report. That's what the coverage log is saying, everything that it's doing. And once it's done here, you can go to the coverage tab and then you'll see the exact same kind of report that we were seeing in our browser, right? Generated by Report Generator. And actually this extension uses Report Generator under the hood. And you can get a bit more risk hotspots will get you cyclomatic complexity. You can get a summary here, and you'll get coverage gutters. So if, let's say, let's do kind of the same thing we did. Let's sort this by branch coverage, and I think there was one that had 0 and 100 and what seems to be, oh, is it not? covered, total branch coverage. Okay, I think that's... there might be a little bug here in their sorting algorithm. But in any case, just to show you, we can click on a particular item and it will take us directly there. And from there, you'll get the code coverage gutters. So green here means this is all covered. We can go to our program file here, green covered, yellow branch that's half covered, and red not covered at all. So there you have it. This is how to get code coverage information inside of Visual Studio. I've shown you how to do it as well in Visual Studio Code and to a certain degree from the command line. I hope this was useful. If you did enjoy this video, please click the like button. If you would like to see more content like this, I encourage you to subscribe to our channel. Thank you.